Hello there, this is Mikhail or Michael speaking. First of all, I want to say thank you all who decided to support me financially on Patreon. Thank you very much and have a blessed day. Now we will jump to Bakhmut immediately. This video is going to be relatively short as there aren't much things happening on the front line. Place where Russians had advanced and captured, it is located here. So the Russians took about this much territory from Ukraine in the last 12 hours. Now, some pro-Ukrainian sources had reported that the Ukrainians had counterattacked here a few days ago and captured about this much territory from the Russians. It would seem that it is not true. Perhaps it is easier to wage war on Twitter than in real life, but yeah, the fact that Russians are advancing here within this area proves that this counterattack was a made-up one. Now, heavy fighting is being reported along the rail line too. This is a hottest spot here on the Bakhmut front line as Russians are launching attacks away from it. Occasionally they reach deep into Ukrainian defense lines, advancing along streets. But overall situation in Bakhmut is quite difficult as both Russians and Ukrainians are bombarding each other with artillery. So that's the reason why we didn't see much movements here. Russian positions are getting heavily shelled, as well as whenever they try to attack, they get shelled as well. Now, same thing happens to Ukrainian forces as well, so that's why there is a lot of back and forth going on in the center of the city. Then we have Samolyot district. Russians continue to hold control over the Korsunskova street here. Heaviest fighting happening here in this sector where the destroyed MiG-17 statue was located. Here Russians are fighting hard for the control over these buildings and in attempt to reach Tchaikovskого street. They're also attacking here and here as well, and in this direction towards this school. Overall, Russians are spreading their zone of control around this street, and as you can see, getting very close to this sector right here, which I predict will become the last positions of Ukrainian forces here within Bakhmut. Overall situation is such is that Russians are attacking from all possible directions. At this point, it is not only Wagner but also elite Russian troops. Ukrainians here are under great pressure. It is reported that about 5,000 of Ukrainian forces are used within Bakhmut, and those forces are quite cramped, which makes Russian artillery very effective at killing those troops. Once again, we can see that the north sector seen much success, unlike center and south. This Russian success, of course, goes with the Russians cutting off the 00506 road that is located here. Now, of course, this road was already under fire control by the Russian forces and almost unusable, but it has been reported they had physically cut this road. Village of Khromovo was a Russian target for a long time, and of course with those Russian attacks they are also attacking from here. The fact that they now have the joint front line helps them a lot as they can reinforce each other if needs be. So it is safe to say that this sector right here is too a subject of heavy fighting. When this Russian success happened, Ukrainians began to throw a lot of troops in attempt to push Russians away from the road, but it would seem that those counterattacks had not achieved their goals. Russians had also conducted limited operations here towards Ivanivsky and those hills areas. Then we have Bogdanivka, for which Russians are battling out for about 2 weeks. Situation here had not changed. Same happens here in Grigorivka, and of course Orekhovo-Vasilivka and Dalan E40 highway, as both Russians and Ukrainians are still tangled in heavy fighting here in this area. Then we go to the Seversk front. Fighting continues in the village of Spirne. Also fighting continues here in Belogorivka. Russians, it would seem, had stopped attacking towards Verkhokamensky itself and are now going towards the hill in attempt to, of course, envelop both Belogorivka and Verkhokamensky. Russians continue fighting in Belogorivka sector. They are attacking here and here. They are also attacking in Serebryansky forest in the attempt of reaching Grigorivka. Belogorivka, as you can see, is already subject of a cauldron. But now Russians are trying to close that cauldron, so these attacks to its flank is part of that operation. Fighting in Serebryansky forest itself continues. Russian sources are claiming a lot of success here along this line, however we need to wait and see more. For example, a lot of sources had said that Russians had already captured this intersection, No maps as of right now are willing to admit that, so that's why it's important to wait a little and see whether those claims were true. Fighting continues here around Dibrova and in the overall direction of Zarichne. Russians had conducted limited military operations towards Terny, Nevsky, and Makiyivka. Zarichne, Yampolivka, Terny, Novosadova, Nevsky, and Makiyivka was subject of Russian artillery strikes. Few days ago, Ukrainians had conducted counterattack here in this sector near Chervonopopivka. They were able to capture some land here, but they were met with fierce Russian resistance and stopped as of right now. We'll see what kind of response Russians have for this situation. Then we go to the Kupiansk front, which is located here. Fighting here is somewhat limited. Russians are not attacking actively here. Overall, they are attacking towards Sinikivka here, as well as Masitivka here. Then we go to the Avdiivka. Somehow village of Kamyanka remains in Ukrainian control. This patch of rail lines is under Russian control as of right now. It would seem that Russians are holding here, with occasionally attacking here along the rail line towards Novobakhmutivka and Stepove. Fighting continues within this general sector. Both Russians and Ukrainians are using a lot of artillery, so it's hard to say who is winning in this sector as of right now. Then we have Russians attacking from Apitne towards Avdiivka. Again, Russian attacks here are highly limited. Mostly Russians are using artillery in order to strike Ukrainian positions within the city and in the fields. Then they launch occasional attack and see how well that artillery strike done. If it done well, Russians advance within some trench lines, and that situation continues on and on. But as of right now, situation had not changed here. Same happens in Vadyane, and Russians were unable to get closer to Severne or Tanenke. Of course, those settlements are being subject of heavy Russian bombardments, as they are used to supply Avdiivka, so Russians are preventing supply of the city to the best of their abilities here. Then we have Russians attacking from Vadyane towards Pervomaisky to the north of it, as well as from Pisky directly towards Pervomaisky along the E50 highway. And Russians had launched some limited counterattacks towards Nevelsky. Then we have Russians also fighting here in Marinka. Fighting continues here in Marinka itself and to the north of it, as well as Russians had again tried to attack towards Pobeda using limited amount of troops, but were unable to reach the settlement. Then we have at last Vuhledar. It would seem that Ukrainian counterattacks here at Vuhledar were met with fierce Russian resistance and were thrown back. Russians continued to control the territories they were controlling before the counterattacks. Not only that, they are also continued to launch attacks within the Dacha area as well as at a city of Vuhledar and towards the mines here. Some videos suggests that Russians are using FAB 500 gliding bombs on this city and had finally started to destroy the high-rise buildings. So we can see the change of strategy for Russians. So this is the end of the video. I hope you liked it. If you did, please, as always, consider supporting it with a like, comments, and if you haven't subscribed yet, a subscription. Also, please consider supporting me on Patreon, as it would help me financially and move me closer to the goal of working on YouTube full-time. As always, humanity calls me to condemn all violence against human beings. Have a great day, and always remember, Russia will be free.